Jinwoo is a skinny and pathetic hunter who sets out on a dangerous mission to a horrible dungeon and ends up unleashing a hidden leveling system that gives him the powers of a demon. With this, he sets out on an all-new adventure. 3 years before this, a dangerous incident occurred where adventurers are attacked by crazy monsters that look like giant ants. However, they are not ordinary ants, as they are bigger than humans and are blood-sucking and dangerous. The adventurers, seeing that none of their weapons can do any damage to the dangerous beasts, decide to leave them to the hunters. The hunters do not seem to be getting the hang over the enemy, as they are overpowered by the dangerous animals. The big ants crawl over them, boring holes into different parts of their bodies and sucking out blood. Just as they get weak, the other hunters, who are experienced and have reached a good rank, arrive at the spot to ward off the monsters. The first person to arrive with a magic book was Byun-gyu. He arrived just in time, slamming the crazy beast with a huge weapon, and then he healed the injured person with healing magic. The other two S-rank hunters, Yonho and Yoonseok, joined forces to completely evacuate the animals. The reason for the invasion of these creatures is due to the breach that was opened 10 years ago. A series of gates linking their world to an alternate dimension appeared. The other side of each gate has creatures called magic beasts on it. These crazy magic beasts are immune to conventional weapons. However, those who have magic are able to fight these beasts, and they are the hunters. They have magical powers contained within their bodies, and they have different ranks, ranging from the lowest to the highest rank. Power is the greatest of all. Now, dating back to the present, a group of hunters is to meet at a place before they begin hunting. Kim, who is getting a coffee, is seen waiting for the others when Park approaches him. He had not been hunting for months because his wife was pregnant, and he had come to raid so he could improve his rank. Just in the middle of their conversation, Jinwoo walks into the park. Kim calls out to him and gossips to his partner about him while he walks past them, pretending to be deaf to their talk. Jinwoo is nicknamed the weakest hunter of all humanity, and this is due to an incident that once occurred during their raid a few months back. He had been admitted to the hospital, where he bumps into a girl called Johi. She is also a hunter and his colleague. On seeing his bandaged face and body, she is curious to know what had happened because of how much she cares about him. She tells him to be more careful and avoid any further injury. In a jiffy, they are gathered for the raid outing under the influence of their leader, Mr. Song. Meanwhile, in the headquarters, a report is made to the chairman of the hunters about the government's demand for resources from the dungeon. The hunters in turn happen to make a living from selling resources. The stones collected from defeated beasts are called essence stones. Back in the dungeon, Jinwoo is able to retrieve one stone from a monster. However, the monster attacks him, and before he can do anything with his little powerless knife, the monster has already pierced through his belly, causing him to gush out blood. He falls to the ground as one of the experienced hunters intervenes, slashing the monster in two. Johi quickly rushes towards him and saves him with her healing magic. She scolds him for getting hurt when he regains consciousness while the others fight off the remaining beasts. Retrieving gems, the essence stones collected from high-ranked beasts can be turned into powerful weapons and also gear for fighting other beasts. However, the government is interested in a different use, which is to use it as a power source to generate electricity. Back in the dungeon, a tunnel is noticed by one of them. They are reluctant to go into the tunnel because of how dangerous it looked, but because most of them are in need of financial support, they try to deliberate on going without telling those at the headquarters. This is so that no one from the top gets to share their rewards with them. Mr. Song decides to cast a vote which results in equality, but can be resolved with just a vote, which is on Sung. Sing, on the other hand, agrees to go because his father is gone missing. His mother is sick and in need of money for her treatment. It doesn't end there, as his sister also needs to go to college. He could not have said otherwise, and so they headed on into the tunnel. Meanwhile, government officials have successfully begun to coerce powerful hunters to work for them, causing them to sign certain agreement documents without the chair's consent. But there is this special S-rank hot-looking hunter whose name is Cha-ha-in. Known for her exploits, they gather around her on a fateful afternoon where she retrieves a stolen bag on the streets. A stupid boy on a bike had made away with a girl's bag, and from nowhere, Cha Hai Hei slid into the picture, pulling a great stunt and causing the stupid fellow to land off the bike, hence collecting the bag and giving it back to the owner. She runs off the gathering immediately, as she is very avoidable, and she is also not a crowded person. Some see this as proud, while others think she is cool. Back in the dangerous dungeon, Johi scolds Sung as usual and tells him to repay her by taking her to lunch. They arrive at a chamber that seems like their destination. However, it turns out to be their worst nightmare. On getting into the chamber, they see different statue figures instead of monsters attacking them. This gives them an opportunity to look around and observe certain things until the door abruptly closes. Johi tells Jinwoo that she had noticed something strange about the statue's eyes. Jinwoo says that she is only imagining things because she is scared. However, this didn't come true because a D-rank hunter soon gets frustrated and tries to leave. It is at this time that two statues come to life and chop off his head ruthlessly. This sets others on alert and in serious fear. Johi begins to recoil behind Jinwoo, who takes his time to study the huge statue that seems seated like a king. They had read about some commandments held by the statue on their arrival, saying that anyone who fails to praise or reference the god and also obey the other commandments will not leave the place alive. This must be the reason for the brutal death of the D-rank hunter. Sung tells everyone to get their heads down on sensing an incoming attack. They raise their heads slowly after the strange figure had created a hole around them using fire. Things begin to get more complicated as Jinwoo believes that they will all die in the dungeon. They all cannot help but wonder if they will survive. Someone suggests that they run while the other opposes, saying that they might get killed. Then Johi and Mr. Song say everyone should stay fixed on a spot, as they could be killed if a single move is made. Mr. Song explains that the god that should be obeyed is the statue, and this is as a result of the gates that were opened decades ago. Abnormal things like people gaining powers and becoming hunters, and also different spirits entering into inanimate objects, are traced back to the gate. While this is going on, Jaina, Sung's sister, is seen in her classroom talking to her friend, who is asking about her brother. Jaina tells her friend that he is an E-rank hunter. Back in the dungeon, a foolish hunter who should have stayed still, he is turned into a roasted meat aside his footwear. Johi screams very hard at this. Sung suggests that they all start by working on the commandments and obeying them. The first commandment is to worship the statue. He is able to convince them to all bow to the statue. In no time, it smiles to their surprise, but things become confused when the statue suddenly begins to walk towards them. It begins to trample on them, killing them one by one. Sung tries to think of the next step and how to achieve it. One of them boldly steps forward, claiming to know how to praise the statue, which is the next commandment, but they are all shocked when the statue stamps the fool. They all begin to run around to save their heads without a clue of survival. Meanwhile, Jinwoo thinks critically and looks around to observe the statues while he is still running. He notices some of them holding musical instruments, so he tells his colleagues to get under any statue that has a musical instrument. By doing so, the statues begin to play instruments to suit the head statue, regarded as God. The rest of them are saved except Mr. Park, who dies in the struggle. He is unable to return home to his wife and kids. Jinwoo also loses one of his legs in the bid to save Johi. They had barely rested when the crazy statue began to cause an earthquake. Shortly after the earthquake, an alteration was created. The next commandment is to believe in God. This will require the sacrifice of a burnt offering. Mr. Kim proposes to take the lead while the rest follow him to the altar. Something strange happens as fire is lit around them. Meanwhile, Jaina leaves school to pay a visit to her mother in the hospital. Back in the dungeon, the place is lit and the background music begins. And then the door is opened. The statues to represent soldiers begin to move towards them as they shiver in fear. Jinwoo discovers that they must keep their eyes on the statues to stop them from moving closer, and by doing so, it will prevent them from dying. One of them runs out of the door in fear, but she makes it alive. It is from this that Jinwoo detects that the door is a trap that offers false hope to those who are afraid. This is to test their faith in God. However, even after hearing this, the second person runs out of the door in horror, saying he cannot hold it any longer. Jinwoo then tells everyone to stay fixed, as there will be a great danger if anyone else moves. Jinwoo assures them that they will be able to escape once the flame goes out completely. However, Mr. Kim is not convinced, as he is worried that they might be locked in just after the flame goes off. Having said this, he runs out of the place like a thunderbolt. Mr. Song, seeing that the statues are coming closer, tells Jinwoo and Jui to exit the building immediately. This is to protect them from dying, as they are still very young. However, as Jo-hee agrees to leave with Jinwoo, she breaks down and cannot move. It appears that she had become weak from treating too many people. Jinwoo tells Mr. Song to take her out of the place, since he had already lost his second leg. Jo-hee tries to stay, but she is knocked off deliberately and taken outside safely. The statue begins to move closer to Jinwoo, and despite his will to stay alive, he is chopped like an abattoir meat and offered up as a sacrifice. However, something strange happens before his heart finally stops. There is a sudden blackout, and the next we see is Jinwoo lying in a hospital bed. He jolts up to reality and finds his arms and legs intact. It seemed like he did not die after all, and while he wonders if he is just dreaming, he is visited by Woo Jin-chul, the manager of the Hunters Association surveillance team, and one other member. They tell him how he had been unconscious for 3 days, and how Mr. Song had lost his arm and might retire as a hunter. But this is as a result of saving Jo-hee, who is healthy but traumatized and is under psychiatric care. It is not so sure that she will continue as a hunter with such a reservation. Only 6 party members survived the bloodbath that could only be described as a mass casualty event. Woo says that the White Tiger Guild arrived and found him lying on the floor unconscious without any traces of a single statue or anything dangerous. Woo surmises that it may be possible Sung experienced what is called a second awakening, and not the kind after a heavy night of drinking. A hunter's power then has the potential to exceed their previous limits and rise to higher ranks. Though it is strange that while high-ranked, hunters are killed within the dungeon, a low-ranked hunter like Sung survives. This is what makes them speculate that he must have received a gift. However, after performing a test on Sung, they strangely find out that he is still as pathetically weak as my aunt's toe. On his way out of the hospital, Woo is confused about Sung's survival, since the dungeon vanished and nothing was found. Meanwhile, something strange pops up on a screen with a message telling Sung to accept a challenge or decline it. It reminds him of the spooky dungeon he survived, and he is exploring the screen when his sister bursts into the room to scold him. She threatens to drop out of school and search for a job if he ever scares her again. Sung scoffs. As if becoming a lady of the night will solve all their problems, she says that it is scary that he had chosen to be a hunter out of all professions. Sung only mutters the sorry word and stays fixed on the new message on his invisible screen. He asks if she can see anything as the screen is still in his view, but Gina doesn't see it, so he tells her to forget it. He clicks on the message box, and this automatically makes him a player. Sung is frustrated as he didn't mean to push your buttons. He was just looking for the mute button. Gina leaves the hospital after seeing him in good shape. He soon finds out that the system that is only visible to him is designed to assist his development as a player, and a penalty will be leached out if he fails to comply with the system. Kind of like receiving a trophy as a power-up, but getting a participation award instead. Sung is still as clueless as ever, but he continues to read through the system. He sees that he must complete certain exercise sessions daily. Meanwhile, Woo reports to the chair about Sung, stating that he does not seem to have any magical powers from the dungeon incident. Later that night, another gate opens to everyone's surprise. People are astonished as they await the hunters. As for Sung, he is woken by serious shaking, and in the next minute, he is in a desert. He is still confused and in his hospital clothes when a crazy long dragon appears, and then he sees the screen telling him that his goal is to survive the attack for 30 minutes. He begins to run from the creature, but when he sees that there are more than one, he lets out a shout and keeps running as fast as he can. Meanwhile, the nurses are notified about his absence from his room, so they start looking around the hospital for the simpleton. In 30 minutes, he is thrown back into the hospital bed, and they find Sung curled up in the corner whispering sweet nothings to himself. He receives a reward for surviving his first penalty round. After a few days, Sung Jinwoo is getting better and is now training consistently so he can be as buff as Arnold Schwarzenegger. He has accepted that he has now fully regained consciousness and not hallucinating like he's taken 5 tabs at a rave party. Also, on completing 3 daily quests, he gets rewarded. He is able to recover from physical stress by activating self-recovery controls. He is improving fast and acquiring new skills from the inventory screen. Meanwhile, Jo-hee receives a phone call to resume hunting, but she declines. However, she is told about Jinwoo's recovery, so she decides to visit him at the hospital. On a fateful day, he checks his request box and sees that he has been gifted with a key. The screen pops up to show him that the key is to access a dungeon to help him get stronger. Meanwhile, the gates are still open all around the street, but the irony is that the gates are locked. The report is given that the hunters are trying their best to close them one after the other, which might result in a traffic jam. Jinwoo goes to visit his mother and then reminisces about what had happened 4 years ago. At that time, she had struck down by a mysterious COVID vaccine and Jaina had returned from school to meet her that way. She was then diagnosed with an eternal sleeping disease. This is a very weird disease, but she is admitted anyway. It had occurred due to the appearance of the gates and her latest immunization. She has been given the best medicine since the incident, until total domination is complete. Since then, Jinwoo had taken on hard jobs and had also worked as a laborer to keep his mother alive. This is what led him to hunting for a job. He leaves the hospital for his quest, and on getting there, he uses his key to access the place. He heads into the dungeon, which closes up immediately. He tries to knock but stops when he sees a girl passing through it freely. It is at this time that he realizes that he is in another dimension. He receives a message telling him that there is no exit unless he defeats the boss or uses a teleportation stone. After peering into the darkness of the dungeon, he is suddenly attacked by 3 goblins after taking a few steps further. He begins to block their attacks with his small sword, but one of the goblins soon strips him of his bag, causing him to dodge in defeat. Jinwoo stands up surprisingly and, from nowhere, he finds the courage to pierce the ugly creature, eliminating it. He goes on to fight with the other 2 creatures and ends up killing them effortlessly. He had hardly caught his breath when a wolf came running in his direction. Jinwoo is set on alert again and begins to dodge several attacks from the monster. The wolf tears him sharply on the cheek. This alarms him as he cannot afford to sustain any injury since he is all alone. The wolf howls happily after scratching him and charges at him again with full Super Saiyan force this time. Throwing him up and around like a toy, Jinwoo gets frustrated that he is being controlled by the wolf, and in the bid to live, he finds his courage again. He punches the wolf angrily and sends it slamming its body on the hardest surface of the dungeon. Now staring at each other sternly as Jinwoo runs towards his bed with the crazy wolf giving a hot chase. He quickly creates an inventory weapon from the system, and believe me, he did not waste so much time as he sliced the wolf into 2 mercilessly. However, before he could say jack, 2 other wolves appear before him, but the mission seems easier with a weapon in his possession. Things get complicated as they approach him, while his weapon is stuck in a hole, but he soon pulls it out with all his power and slices one of the wolves into a dinner meat. While he strikes the last one, his weapon is stuck in its teeth, but he uses this as a leverage to finish it off by cutting through its body from the teeth to the tail. Such a brutal death. However, he seemed to be improving as he is now at level 2. He sits to rest in the corner of the dungeon. He only gets 3 points from the daily quest, while fighting earns him 5 points. He now finds fighting more efficient than his daily routine or training. He begins to believe that he can get stronger, as his body now feels lighter and able to do different new things. However, on second thought, he thinks he might be overreacting considering that he had only killed small beasts. He goes to kneel beside them to search and see if they all possess essence stones. However, the system appears to show him that he can only retrieve items as rewards and not essence stones from the beasts. He sells the item he collects and earns 20 gold coins. Remembering that he cannot leave the place without beating the boss, he picks up his sword and goes to search for the boss as he will run out of food if he stays too long. On second thought, Jinwoo is not confident about beating a boss on his own. He thinks of increasing his level before going to face the real deal. Having said this, more wolves are provided to charge at him. Already used to it, he charges back at them with full force and slashes them with his sword one after the other. He does this so swiftly and with so much confidence, like an experienced raider. More wolves surround him as he breathes heavily and without the intention of relenting. He makes the fight more intense by thinking about all he has been through before his leveling. This gives him the morale to fight endlessly and happily. He levels up real quickly, and he is given a name by the system. He is now referred to as the Wolf Assassin. For his reward, he gets 34 wolf fangs, 2 worn daggers, and a traveler's cloak. He also gets a teleportation stone. He thinks of leaving, but he is very hungry for power, and the desire to get stronger will never let him. He is also unsure of what will happen to the dungeon after his exit. He is also stuck between moving forward and heading back. He eventually goes deeper into the dungeon. Somewhere else, Jo-hee is walking down the streets when she receives a call about a dungeon break at the gates. Although they have been able to get hunters, there are not many healers available. On hearing this, she agrees to help. Meanwhile, Jinwoo keeps eliminating monsters and keeps getting stronger and leveling up with each defeat. He suddenly began to feel goosebumps. This is because he can now sense the presence of a monster in the dungeon. It seems like it will turn out to be the boss. He walks down the stairs quietly, but he is soon swept away by a large pool. This happens twice, and then he is clearly able to access the creature. It is a tall snake with armored scales. The snake possesses the same level of power as him, which makes it harder to defeat it. His sword is broken, and even if it is not, it will not be easy to penetrate the scales. While still trying to find a way around its defense, the creature slams Jinwoo on different surfaces and throws him in and out of water like a plaything. He is being roughly dealt with, and there is hardly any time to think. He slightly escapes a train wreck as the fight is happening in an abandoned railway station. He is now convinced that he has too much work to do with training, as his strength is not yet enough to defeat some monsters. He manages to stand on his feet, only to be slammed against a wall and pushed through it. He keeps trying to strike through the snake, but his effort is futile. He becomes emotional as he recounts the terror he has faced with the god. With this, he impatiently tears through the snake and ends up killing it with all the strength he had left. There is silence after the long-awaited war, with Jinwoo breathing very heavily and covered with blood. He manages to stand up weakly and obtains the item retrieved from the creature. Shortly after this, he receives a notification about the dungeon returning to its normal state since the boss has been defeated. Everything disappears immediately as Jinwoo is sent back to the proper railway station. On his way out, with rain drizzling, he is ushered to a scene where there is a broken dungeon. This is because he identifies as a hunter with a sword in his left hand. He hides in among the crowd and, on seeing Jo-hee, he can tell that she is still traumatized from the incident from before. He hesitates for a while, but after a little thought, he strikes the beast with a single throw and disappears thereafter. One of the hunters who had been trying to take down the beasts could tell that someone had intervened. Jo-hee, in turn, could strangely feel Jinwoo's presence. The next day, at the hospital, during Jinwoo's workout, the nurses gossip about his hot body and how his packs are well packed. They talk about how he was nothing like that from the beginning, and how he had improved himself. Having stopped their gossip and now returning to proper duty, one of the nurses is transfixed on seeing him after knocking on his door. She had the intention of communication, but is rendered speechless after seeing his body before finding her words again. She tells him about the plan to discharge him on that very day, but first she needs to know if he feels much better. He says he is ready, and then she tells him to report to the reception while they prepare his paperwork. Not being able to hold her emotions, she demands for his contact. Foolish and unromantic, Jinwoo gives it to her, thinking that she had requested to send his test results later. On the next day, his sister teases him before going to school after seeing his stomach muscles. She tells him to have some leftovers that she had kept in the freezer the night before, and then leaves for school immediately. He bids her farewell and then returns to his daily routine. He says he will do his running later and then examines his muscles. He says he will keep leveling up so he will end up like a bodybuilder. In the middle of this, he remembers that he had not really made use of his ability points, so he increases his strength and agility. He also increases his intellect, and just after this, his phone rings. He picks it up as if he had been expecting the call for so long. It happened that the house owner is calling to remind him of his rent. He apologizes for not being available for a while as he had been in the hospital, and promises to make his payment as fast as he can. This is said, he drops the call and begins to browse online jobs. Although it is difficult to secure one as he is still believed by many to be of low rank, he is set to pay his rent and also be responsible for other things. He tries to come up with a plan of making himself known, as a bit of popularity will make him the center of attention, and this will help him to earn more. While he is still thinking, he surprisingly receives a call from a hunting official, and without a second thought, he has already arrived at the place. However, before he could introduce himself, one of them identifies him to be the weakest hunter of all time. This does not move him, as the leader of the raid still offers to have him on board. He is to accompany them into the C-rank dungeon, as they need 8 people to access the dungeon. With his participation, things would be easier. However, they will not be sharing the spoils with him, since he is not a combatant but they promise to pay him a sum of 2 million for participating. This brightens his eyes as he agrees to go on the mission with them. However, they assign him ridiculous things like helping them carry their baggage, which includes food and other things. He notices that they are going without a healer, so he asks, but the leader tells him that this is because of how hard it is for independent parties to retain them. Just as they are about to head off into the dungeon, Jinho, a 20-year-old boy, shows up with fancy armor and requires joining the raid. Jinwoo, in his head, thinks the boy's parents must be so rich for him to appear in such armor. They set out immediately and on their way to the dungeon. Jinho keeps ranting to Jinwoo's ears about how the manager of site fled with a sum of 900 million, and then, after a while, he regains the sense to keep quiet and walk. They soon arrive at the gate as they all walk into the breach, taking them to another dimension where there is neither light nor magical beasts. One of them lights up the place for the rest as they walk deeper into the strange dungeon. On seeing the dungeon, Jinwoo is reminded of the Kartanon Temple, where he had the worst day of his life. They arrive at a crossroads in 3 different directions. Jinwoo and the leader quickly detect that an attack is coming, so the leader tells them to get ready to fight. They all get into different positions with their weapons ready to attack. Apart from being able to detect their presence, Jinwoo tells them the exact creatures to expect, as only insect-type beasts lurk in the dark. There are so many tunnels around as the noise keeps getting intense and unbearable. Right before they attack, Jinwoo detects immediately that they are coming from a tunnel that is above them, so he raises an alarm. They wipe out the insects in a jiffy. However, in the process of killing these beasts, Jinwoo takes his time to study his fellow raiders and sees that they are well coordinated, and it looks like they have been working together for a long time. He sees that they are a bit rough on the edges with their fighting abilities because of the lack of healers. Although Jinho does not possess any special quality, his armor seems to be protective enough. In the middle of these thoughts, Jinwoo still feels like something isn't right. They had already eliminated all the insects without a single survivor at this time, and the leader now proposes that they grab the essence stones and split them in 7 ways, excluding Jinwoo. The leader walks up to Jinwoo to thank him for warning them about the insects. He inquires to know how he had found out about their entrance point. Jinwoo tells him that it was merely instinctive. After this, they notice that the insects have been originally weakened before the fight, and this can only mean that there are other powerful creatures lurking around the building. Jinwoo tells them to be careful. Things seemed to be going too smoothly as the dungeon seemed empty and easy to penetrate without any dangerous beasts in order for the insects to approach. This makes Jinwoo very worried, but he proceeds with the walk. They go deeper into the dungeon in search of a wild beast, possibly the boss. The leader instructs that the place be lit as they take bold steps into the tunnel. They see a slightly different tunnel from the rest, which gives the hint that a wild beast is definitely after the tunnel. They look like 1 billion worth of materials even at a glance. As they adore the crystals, Jinho suddenly demands to see Jinwoo's contract and then proceeds to ask the leader if Jinwoo would be getting some of the crystal stones, since it is not from any beasts, as stated in the contract that he is not entitled to essence stones. The leader agrees to give him a share of the crystals, but he calls their attention to the dungeon boss who is supposedly hidden at the top of the crystals. He also tells them that they have to be very swift and fast as the dungeon usually closes immediately when the boss is defeated. He suggests that they mine. However, they seem to have forgotten to bring some equipment, so they leave Jinho and Jinwoo in the dungeon, promising to be back early before the spider wakes up. However, on getting out, they seal off the boss chamber. This is what Jinwoo had sensed when he had said things were a little bit weird. They are traitors who always take innocent hunters on missions and end up leaving them to die after benefiting from them, since there are no cameras to see them in dungeons. The spider begins to approach them, and on a first thought, Jinwoo is unsure of what to do, but when he remembers what had happened a few months ago with his boss, he suddenly takes back his fear and activates his optimism mode. He tells Jinho to stand back as he will fight off the spider alone. After leaving Jinho and Jinwoo to die and on their way out of the dungeon, one of the wicked hunters says that they should have killed them instead of leaving them. However, the leader says that it is rather dumb to fight in a dungeon where a dangerous monster is asleep. He says there will be no more crystals if anything goes wrong. He says he doesn't care if Jinwoo is the weakest, but there is no way he will come out alive. They plan to get them killed by the spider and then pack the crystals when it goes back to sleep. This is rather stupid, but they still decide to wait outside for Jinho and Jinwoo to get eaten by the spider. Meanwhile, at the chamber, Jinho tries to stop Jinwoo from fighting because he is E rank, as a higher ranking is required to kill any dungeon boss. He advises that they try to find their way out of the place instead of trying to fight the spider. Jinwoo tries to consider his point, as the boss seems stronger than all the beasts he has ever fought or even trained with. However, he feels a stronger desire to face it and fight it off, and by now we know that Jinwoo is a hunter who does not give up easily. With this, he charges towards the beast while Jinho opens his mouth in shock. He is unable to penetrate the skin of the spider as its exoskeleton is too hard, and this is not the only crazy thing about the C-rank spider. It also strikes with so much power that it can kill Jinwoo if he makes any wrong move. However, he moves swiftly through the spider and is able to cut a part of its many legs. Jinho just stands transfixed and keeps wondering if he is really an E-rank hunter. He is convinced that Jinwoo had probably faked his ranking. His moves are super impressive and rare. He tries to strike the spider on its weak spot, but before he can get to the top, it spills a hot liquid that appears to be acid. Jinwoo quickly shields himself from this and tries numerous times again to strike the weak spot. He wants to kill the spider before he begins to reach his limit. In no time, a warning comes from the system that he has reached a fatigue limit of 70%. He gets distracted as the spider throws him down to earth, breaking through the solid floor. However, just as the spider is about to land him a final blow, he regains his strength and activates full recovery. This sets him back on his feet, running swiftly to reach the weak spot again. The spider is much taller, making it difficult to reach its head. In spite of this, he ends up landing on the large eyes of the spider and then striking it till it becomes paralyzed and drained. The boss falls to the ground, dead. Jinho finds it difficult to believe what has just happened as he is fixed on a spot with his eyes on Jinwoo. After killing it, he retrieves its essence stone, which will fetch a lot of money. Jinho begins to treat him differently and more like a big brother. Jinwoo is surprised at such gestures, but he stands back and watches the young man. Just as they prepare to leave, the wicked hunters who had left them to die suddenly show up and, instead of backing out, the leader stupidly thinks that Jinho has defeated the monster with his suit. So he tells him to kill Jinwoo if he wants to make it out alive, since his father is a very rich man, and getting close to him is of great advantage. Meanwhile, he plans to kill Jinho and take the armor. Jinho is shocked that he is asked to kill his almighty Jinwoo, so he just stands there without a single word. After a while, he turns against them to notify them of his rebellion. Seeing this, he tells his men to kill Jinwoo, and then they will take Jinho. They begin to charge at them, but just as Jinwoo is prepared to kick their stupid asses, he receives a notification on his system of an urgent quest that he needs to attend to. On seeing this, he loses focus, and he is then struck by an unexpected weapon, which sends him flying back. Jinho is scared to death as he sees Jinwoo almost lying lifeless. However, he refuses to die as he rises up slowly, even with his head covered in blood. Jinho is relieved as he cleans off the blood to resume business with the evil men. He begins to move towards them slowly as they stare in surprise. They had obviously never seen such a thing in their entire lives of hunting. He tells them to brace themselves, but one of them, who is luckily the first person to die, walks up to him to taunt him. Jinwoo chops off his head without a second thought. He feels guilty for killing a human, but since the system had reported that his heart will stop, he is left without a choice but to eliminate them all. He kills them all, and surprisingly this helps him level up. In no time, the dungeon begins to collapse. They hurry out of the dungeon to remit the items they had retrieved. Luckily, no one asks for those unlucky bastards as they only reward Jinho and Jinwoo, and say they have returned alive. However, the receptionist at the Hunters Guild believes that both of them have made it out alive with the help of Jinho and his powerful armor. Jinwoo, in turn, does not argue about this as they happily retrieve the item and leave.